They say you never know who's standing beside you until it's too late. On the 42nd floor of Thornfeld Financial Tower, a CEO who built her empire on ruthlessness learned this truth the hardest way possible when the janitor she'd ignored for 6 years threw himself in front of a bullet meant for her. This is the story of Callum Renshaw, the invisible hero who proved that courage doesn't wear a suit. The morning of October 17 started like any other Tuesday at Thornfeld Financial Corporation. The sun climbed over Manhattan's skyline, casting long shadows across the glass and steel monument to American capitalism that was Thornfeld Tower. 42 stories of power, ambition, and money. On the ground floor, tourists snapped photos. On the trading floors, analysts shouted into phones. And on the executive level, the 42nd floor, where the air seemed thinner and the carpets cost more than most people's cars, Senna Thornfeld prepared for war, not the kind with guns and soldiers, the kind with spreadsheets and shareholders. Senna stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive boardroom, her reflection sharp against the cityscape. At 38, she was everything the business magazine said she was. Brilliant, beautiful, brutal. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that said efficient. Her Armani suit was tailored to project authority. Her heels were expensive enough to hurt. She'd been CEO of Thornfeld Financial for 8 years, following in her father's footsteps. In that time, she doubled the company's value, laid off 2,000 employees, and earned a reputation as the ice queen of Wall Street. She preferred the word focused. Behind her, 12 executives sat around a table that stretched like an aircraft carrier, surrounded by leather chairs that cost $8,000 each. They were waiting for the quarterly review meeting to begin, a meeting Senna had called unexpectedly, which meant someone's head was on the chopping block. Outside the boardroom, in the executive corridor, Callum Renshaw pushed his janitor's cart across marble floors that reflected the recessed lighting like a still pond. The cart's wheels squeaked rhythmically. Squeak, squeak, squeak. A sound so common that nobody heard it anymore. Callum had learned that's how most invisible things worked. They weren't truly invisible. People just decided not to see them. At 36, Callum had the kind of face that told stories if you bothered to look. Weathered skin, a slight crook in his nose from where it had been broken twice, gray threading through his dark hair, and eyes. Those eyes that had seen too much and somehow stayed kind anyway. He wore the same thing every day. Dark blue maintenance uniform with Thornfeld Financial Custodial Services embroidered on the chest. Underneath, a plain white t-shirt that hid the scars. Most people who passed him in the halls didn't see Callum Renshaw, combat medic, decorated veteran, father, survivor. They saw a janitor, equipment, furniture that occasionally moved and cleaned things. Callum had made peace with that years ago. Mostly. He checked his watch. An old Timex his wife Margot had given him 3 years earlier, back when she was still alive, before the cancer took her. 9:47 in the morning. He had 3 more floors to cover before his shift break. And then he'd promised Willa he'd call during her lunch period. His daughter, his entire world. His reason for waking up every morning and doing a job that paid $16.50 an hour when he'd once commanded teams of medical specialists in combat zones. But Willa needed consistency. Willa needed a dad who came home every night, not one who deployed to places where American flags came back folded in triangles. That's what Margot would have wanted. His wife had made him promise, in those final weeks at the hospice, that he would put Willa first. Always Willa. And Callum had kept that promise, even when it meant becoming invisible. So he mopped floors and emptied trash bins and existed in the margins of other people's important lives. He was refilling the soap dispenser in the executive washroom when he heard it. Voices, raised wrong. Callum's training kicked in before his conscious mind could process the information, the tone, the cadence, the underlying frequency of panic. His body recognized it the way a combat veteran recognizes the whistle of incoming mortars. His hand froze on the soap dispenser. His heart rate didn't increase. Years of emergency response had taught him that adrenaline was useful only if you controlled it. He moved to the door and opened it slightly. The executive corridor was mostly empty, standard for this time of morning when everyone who mattered was in meetings. But there, near the boardroom entrance, A man in an ill-fitting suit was arguing with the receptionist. "Sir, you can't go in there," she was saying, her voice professionally firm, but edged with concern. "If you don't have an appointment." "I had an appointment." The man's shout echoed off the marble. "I had an appointment for 15 years. And then she just—" His voice broke, and that's when Callum noticed the hand. The gun was small, probably a .38 revolver, held low against the man's thigh. Amateur grip, shaking, which made it more dangerous, not less. Every nerve in Callum's body went electric. His training cataloged details in microseconds. White male, approximately 45, perspiring despite the building's climate control. Disheveled appearance suggesting sleep deprivation. Weapon visible only from certain angles. Psychological state escalating. Callum didn't think. He learned a long time ago that thinking got people killed. He stepped into the corridor. "Hey," he called out, his voice calm, conversational, as if he'd just noticed two friends chatting. "Everything okay?" The man's head whipped around. Up close, Callum could see the broken capillaries in his eyes, the tremor in his jaw. This was someone at the end of a very long, very bad road. "Who the hell are you?" the man demanded. "Maintenance," Callum said, gesturing to his uniform. He kept his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. "Just wondering if you needed help finding something. This floor can be confusing. I know exactly where I need to go." The man's hand tightened on the gun. "I need to see Senna Thornfeld. I need to see the woman who destroyed my life." Behind the reception desk, the woman had gone completely still, her hand hovering near the phone. Callum caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't move. Don't escalate." "Okay," Callum said slowly. "I understand. You want to talk to Miss Thornfeld. That makes sense. What's your name?" "Jansen." The man laughed, bitter and broken. "Like it matters. Like she would remember. I was employee number 30447. Just a number. Just another." His voice cracked. "I gave this company 15 years. 15 years. I missed my daughter's childhood. I missed anniversaries. I killed myself trying to make them happy. And then one day, security escorts me out with a box of my things and a severance package that didn't even cover 2 months' mortgage." Callum's heart sank. He knew this story. He'd heard versions of it 100 times in VA hospitals and support groups. When you took away a person's purpose, their identity, you created a wound that didn't show up on x-rays but bled just as real. "Jansen," Callum said quietly, "I hear you. I understand." "No, you don't." Jansen raised the gun slightly. "You're just a janitor. You don't know what it's like to be someone who mattered. And then just not." "You're right," Callum interrupted gently. "I'm just a janitor, which means I'm exactly the kind of person who knows what it feels like to be invisible, to be the one people look through instead of at." Jansen blinked. Some of the fury in his face flickered. "But here's the thing," Callum continued, taking one careful step forward. "You're not invisible right now. I notice you. She notices you." He gestured toward the receptionist. "And whatever you're planning to do in that boardroom, that's not going to make people see you the way you want. That's just going to make you the thing they were afraid of." "I don't care anymore." Jansen's shout echoed through the marble corridor. "I don't care what they think. I just want her to look at me. I want her to understand what she did." Inside the boardroom, Senna was mid-sentence when she heard the shout. She stopped, frowned. "What was that?" asked her CFO. Before anyone could answer, the boardroom doors burst open. Jansen stood in the doorway, gun raised. And for one terrible moment, the entire world held its breath. 12 executives froze. Someone's presentation clattered to the floor. Someone gasped. And Senna Thornfeld, who had built a career on never showing fear, felt ice flood her veins. "You," Jansen said, his voice shaking as badly as the gun in his hand. His finger was on the trigger. "You took everything from me. Do you even remember my name? Do you even remember?" Senna's mind raced. She'd authorized hundreds of terminations, maybe thousands. This man could have been any of them. "I'm Jansen Murdoch," he said, tears streaming down his face now. 15 years in regional accounts. I made this company millions, millions, and you threw me away like I was nothing." Behind Jansen in the doorway, Callum Renshaw appeared. His movements were so quiet, so controlled. that at first no one noticed him. He'd followed Jansen down the corridor, staying back, looking for an opening. Now he assessed the situation in the way only someone with combat medical training could. 12 potential casualties, one armed aggressor in psychological crisis, approximately 20 feet between the gunman and the nearest executive. Senna Thornfeld standing near the window. Primary target, most exposed position. The gun was pointed at her heart. Callum calculated angles, distances, timing. He was 36 years old. His knees weren't what they used to be. He'd had 2 surgeries on his left shoulder from an IED injury in Fallujah. But his training was muscle memory, written into his body the way prayers are written into the faithful. He thought about Willa. Thought about how she'd asked him last week what a hero really was. Thought about how he'd told her someone who does the right thing even when it's hard, even when it costs them something. She'd looked at him with those serious 7-year-old eyes and said, "Like you, Daddy." He'd laughed it off, deflected. He was just a janitor now. His hero days were behind him. But looking at Jansen Murdoch, broken, desperate, seconds from doing something that couldn't be undone, and looking at Senna Thornfeld, frozen, finally afraid, finally vulnerable, Callum understood something with perfect clarity. Your hero days aren't behind you until you decide they are. "Jansen," Callum said quietly from the doorway. Jansen spun, wild-eyed. The gun swung away from Senna and toward Callum. Several people in the boardroom screamed. "Put it down," Callum said. Not a command, a request, from one human to another. "Please, you don't want this. I know you think you do, but you don't. Your daughter," you mentioned a daughter, "she needs you. Not in prison, not dead. She needs her father." "My daughter doesn't even speak to me anymore." Jansen's shout was anguish incarnate. "I lost her too. I lost everything." "Then don't lose yourself." Callum took one step into the room. His hands were up, empty, open. "Jansen, I've been where you are. Different circumstances, maybe. But that feeling, like the whole world forgot you existed, I know it. And I'm telling you, this isn't the answer. This doesn't fix it." "Nothing fixes it." Jansen swung the gun back toward Senna. "Nothing fixes what people like her do to people like us." And that's when Senna Thornfeld did something she'd never done in any crisis before. She spoke from the heart. "You're right." The room went completely silent. Jansen's hand wavered. Senna took one small step forward. "You're right. I don't remember you. I don't remember your name or your work or your—" Her voice caught. "I don't remember your humanity. And that's my failure. Not yours. Mine." Jansen stared at her, the gun still raised but trembling now. "I built this company by making hard decisions," Senna continued. And for the first time in her career, her voice wasn't steel, it was just human. "By cutting costs and maximizing efficiency and treating people like numbers on a spreadsheet. I told myself it was business, just business. But you're not a number, Jansen. You're someone's father, someone's husband, someone who deserved better." "I was someone," Jansen interrupted, sobbing now. "I was someone." "You still are," Callum said quietly. He'd moved closer, positioning himself between Jansen and Senna without Jansen fully realizing it. "You're still someone, Jansen. You're still here. You still matter. And what you do in the next 10 seconds, that's going to define what your daughter remembers about you for the rest of her life." Jansen's arm was shaking violently now. "I just wanted her to look at me," he whispered, "to acknowledge what she did." "I acknowledge it," Senna whispered back. "I see you now, Jansen. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." For a moment, everyone in that room believed it would be okay, that Jansen would lower the gun, that somehow, impossibly, words had been enough. And then Jansen's phone rang. The sound was jarring, absurd, a cheerful pop song ringtone in the middle of a hostage situation. Jansen flinched. His finger, already on the trigger, tensed reflexively. The gun fired. Callum didn't think. His body was already moving before the sound registered. 15 years of combat medicine, of training that said, save them first, ask questions later, of muscles that remembered what it meant to be someone who ran toward danger instead of away. All of it compressed into a single moment. He lunged forward, arms outstretched, body angling to cover as much of Senna Thornfeld as physically possible. The bullet hit him in the left side of his chest, just below his collarbone. The impact was like being hit with a sledgehammer wrapped in fire. Callum had been shot before, twice actually, in Kandahar, and his body recognized the sensation with an almost clinical detachment. Entry wound. No exit wound. Bullet still inside. Possible subclavian artery damage. Possible pneumothorax. He felt his legs give out. Felt himself falling. Felt Senna's shocked gasp of air as his weight brought them both down. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Someone screamed. Multiple people ran for the doors. Jansen stood frozen, staring at the gun in his hand as if it had materialized there, as if he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "Oh God," Jansen whispered. "Oh God, I didn't." Security burst through the doors. 3 guards who'd been on the floor below when the panic button was triggered. They tackled Jansen, sending the gun clattering across the marble floor. Jansen didn't resist. He collapsed into their grip, sobbing. On the ground, Callum felt warm blood soaking through his uniform. His breath came in short, painful gasps. He'd treated enough penetrating chest wounds to know he probably had minutes before shock set in. Maybe less. But before he could assess anything else, he felt hands on his face. Senna Thornfeld was kneeling beside him, her perfect suit stained with his blood, her expression shattered. "Oh God, why would you? Callum tried to smile. It probably looked more like a grimace. "Someone had to." "Don't talk." Senna looked around frantically. "Call 911. Someone call. Where's the medical?" "Already called," someone shouted. "Ambulance is coming." Callum's vision was starting to narrow at the edges. That wasn't good. That meant blood loss, shock, possibly internal bleeding. He'd witnessed this in dozens of patients. Never thought he'd experience it himself. "Stay with me," Senna said, and Callum noticed she was crying. Senna Thornfeld, the Ice Queen of Wall Street, who'd never shown emotion in any quarterly meeting or hostile takeover or mass layoff, was crying over a janitor bleeding out on her boardroom floor. "Please stay with me. What's your name? Tell me your name." "Callum," he managed. "I'm Callum Renshaw." "Callum," she said it like a prayer. "Callum, stay awake. Keep your eyes open. Help is coming. You're going to be fine. You're going to..." But Callum's eyes were already closing. Not because he wanted them to. His body was making decisions for him now, prioritizing functions, shutting down non-essential systems to preserve what little blood pressure remained. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness took him was Senna's voice, raw and desperate. "Somebody help him, please. Somebody save this man's life." And somewhere in his fading consciousness, Callum thought, "That's funny. That's what I was trying to do." Then darkness. The paramedics arrived in 7 minutes, excellent response time for Midtown Manhattan. They found Callum Renshaw unconscious, pulse thready at 130 beats per minute, blood pressure 80/40 and dropping. The lead paramedic did a quick assessment and didn't like what she found. "We need to move. Now! He's circling the drain." They had him on a gurney and in the elevator in 90 seconds. In the ambulance and racing toward Mount Sinai West with sirens screaming in 6 minutes. In the boardroom, Senna Thornfeld sat on the floor, covered in someone else's blood, while her executive team hovered uselessly and security led Jansen Murdoch away in handcuffs. Her CFO crouched beside her. "Senna, are you hurt?" "I'm fine." Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I'm perfectly fine." She looked down at her hands, her perfectly manicured, always controlled hands, and watched them shaking, noticed the blood under her fingernails. Callum Renshaw's blood. A janitor. A man whose name she hadn't known until he told her while bleeding out on her floor. A man who'd thrown himself in front of a bullet meant for her. "Who is he?" Senna asked quietly. "What?" "The janitor. Callum Renshaw. Who is he? Get me his file. Get me everything. Employment records, background, emergency contacts, everything." 10 minutes later, she was in her office, door locked, reading through the thin personnel file of a man named Callum Renshaw, while her hands still trembled and her suit still bore the evidence of his sacrifice. Employee ID 3891. Position, custodial services, executive floor. Hire date, June 3rd, 2019. Emergency contact, Willa Renshaw. Daughter, age 7. There was more. Previous address, basic work history, standard background check. But it was the additional notes section that made Senna's blood freeze. Military service, U.S. Navy, 1992-2012. Rank, Chief Hospital Corpsman. Deployments, Iraq 3, Afghanistan 2. Commendations, Navy Cross, Purple Heart 2, Bronze Star with Valor. And underneath that, a note from the HR manager who'd processed his application. Applicant is significantly overqualified, but specifically requested custodial position due to family circumstances. Combat medic with extensive trauma experience, recommended for hire. Senna read the note 3 times. Then she pulled up Google and searched Navy Cross. The Navy Cross is the second highest military decoration awarded by the Department of the Navy for extraordinary heroism in combat. She read that line 5 times. Then she kept digging through military records, newspaper archives, commendation citations. What she found made her physically ill. June 2005, Fallujah, Iraq. Navy Hospital Corpsman Callum Renshaw ran through enemy fire to reach wounded Marines. He treated 4 men under active combat conditions, using his own body to shield them during the attack. He was shot twice. He kept working until all 4 Marines were stabilized and evacuated. October 2009, Kandahar, Afghanistan. During a patrol ambush, Corpsman Renshaw's unit took heavy casualties. He moved from position to position for 3 hours, treating wounded, directing medevac operations, and personally carrying 2 injured soldiers to safety. And then, the discovery that made Senna stop breathing entirely. March 2013. Linden, New Jersey. Off-duty Navy veteran Callum Renshaw entered a burning chemical plant to rescue workers trapped by an explosion. He led 8 people to safety despite toxic smoke and structural instability. The local news coverage included photos. Callum emerging from smoke, face black with soot, supporting an older man who could barely walk. The older man's name was in the caption, Preston Thornfeld, plant supervisor, her father. Senna's hands began to shake so badly she had to set down the tablet. Her father, the man who built this company, who taught her everything about business, who'd nearly died in that explosion 6 years ago. She remembered getting the call, remembered the panic, the drive to New Jersey, the relief when she found her father shaken but alive. He'd told her a worker pulled him out. Some Navy guy, he'd said. Hell of a thing. Didn't even know his name. Nobody had known his name. And 6 years later, when that same nameless hero had applied for a job at Thornfeld Financial, had stood in some HR office filling out forms, had likely walked past Senna in the hallways, had mopped the floors outside her office. Not one person had connected the dots. Senna had walked past him for 6 years without ever noticing him. She opened her desk drawer, pulled out the bottle of bourbon she kept for late nights and difficult decisions, and poured 3 fingers into a crystal tumbler. Her hand was still shaking when she raised it to her lips. On the 42nd floor of Thornfeld Financial Tower, the cleaning crew arrived to scrub blood off marble floors. The boardroom was declared a crime scene and sealed off. Employees were sent home early. The communications department drafted 3 different press releases, and Senna Thornfeld sat alone in her office, drinking bourbon and staring at the personnel file of a man she'd never bothered to notice, wondering how you thank someone for saving your life when you'd spent years treating them like they didn't exist. At Mount Sinai West in Operating Room 3, Callum Renshaw's heart stopped twice. The trauma surgeon, Dr. Adiz Okafor, brought it back both times. Come on, she muttered as she worked, her hands moving with the precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times but never stopped caring. Come on, hero. Don't you quit on me. The bullet had done exactly what Senna had feared. Nicked the subclavian artery, collapsed his left lung, and lodged against his 4th rib. Dr. Okafor extracted it, repaired the artery, reinflated the lung, and closed him up with the kind of meticulous care she usually reserved for her own family members. In the ICU, Callum lay unconscious. Machines breathing for him, monitors tracking every heartbeat. At PS 42 in Queens, 7-year-old Willa Renshaw sat in her 2nd grade classroom, working on a math worksheet when the school secretary appeared in the doorway and whispered something to her teacher. Mrs. Patterson's face went very still. She nodded. Then she walked over to Willa's desk and knelt down. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "you need to come with me." Willa's grandmother, her father's mother, Nora Renshaw, arrived at the school in 15 minutes and took Willa's small hand in her weathered one. "Grandma," Willa's voice was very small, "where's Dad?" Nora Renshaw was 74 years old. She'd raised 4 children, buried a husband, and watched her youngest son deploy to war zones 5 times, holding her breath each time until he came home safe. She thought those days of fear were over. She'd been wrong. "Your dad had an accident at work, baby," Nora said carefully. "He's in the hospital, but he's strong, and the doctors are taking very good care of him." "What kind of accident?" Nora looked at her granddaughter. This bright, brave little girl who'd already lost her mother to cancer and now might lose her father to violence, and did what she'd always done, told the truth. "Someone got hurt and your dad helped them. That's what your dad does, Willa. He helps people." Willa's eyes filled with tears. "Is he going to be okay?" "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I know he's fighting. Your dad's a fighter." In the car on the way to the hospital, Willa sat very still, clutching the backpack her father had helped her pack that morning when the world was still normal and safe. Inside the backpack was her math homework, a library book about dinosaurs, and a picture she'd drawn for him. A crayon drawing of the two of them holding hands, with "My Hero" written across the top in careful childish letters. She wondered if she'd get to give it to him. She wondered if heroes could die from helping people. She wondered what she'd do if the answer was yes. At Mount Sinai West, Senna Thornfeld had to use her considerable influence just to get past the security desk. The hospital staff didn't care that she was a CEO or that her company's name was on one of the research wings. She wasn't family. She wasn't on the approved visitor list. "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but unless you're next of kin—" "He saved my life," Senna's voice cracked. "He took a bullet meant for me. I need to know he's alive." The security guard looked at her, really looked at her, and noticed something that transcended policy and procedure. He noticed a human being who'd witnessed something traumatic and needed closure. "Third floor, ICU, but you can't see him. Family only." "I understand. Thank you." Senna took the elevator to the 3rd floor and stood outside the ICU, looking through the glass at the rows of beds and machines and critically ill patients who represented someone's entire world. She didn't know which one was Callum Renshaw. She didn't know if he was alive or dead. A nurse came out, noticed her standing there. "Can I help you?" "Callum Renshaw, the gunshot victim from Thornfeld Financial. Is he alive?" The nurse's expression softened. "Are you family?" "No, I'm—" Senna stopped. What was she? The woman he'd saved? The CEO he'd worked for? The person who'd never bothered to learn his name? "I'm nobody, but he's somebody, and I need to know he's okay. He made it through surgery. He's critical but stable. That's all I can tell you." Senna felt something release in her chest. "Thank you." She turned to leave, and then the elevator doors opened. An elderly woman stepped out, holding the hand of a small girl with dark hair and eyes exactly like Callum Renshaw's. Senna froze. The woman, Nora, though Senna didn't know that yet, approached the nurse's station. "I'm here to see my son, Callum Renshaw. He was brought in a few hours ago with a gunshot wound." The nurse checked her computer. "You're on his emergency contact list. This must be Willa." The little girl nodded, mute with fear. "He's in recovery," the nurse said gently. "He's not awake yet, but you can sit with him. This way." As they followed the nurse toward the ICU, Willa looked back. Her eyes met Senna's. And in that moment, Senna Thornfeld understood something with perfect, painful clarity. This child might lose her father because of her company, because of her decisions, because of the culture she'd built that had broken a man so badly he'd shown up with a gun. The weight of that realization was crushing. Willa's small voice carried back through the corridor. "Grandma, is Daddy gonna die?" Nora's response was too quiet to hear, but Senna didn't need to hear it. She could notice it in the way Nora's shoulders tensed, in the way she squeezed Willa's hand. Nobody knew if Callum Renshaw would survive. The first rays of morning light filtered through the ICU windows. casting pale gold across the linoleum floors where Willa Renshaw had fallen asleep, in a chair too large for her small body. Her head rested against her grandmother's arm. Her hand still clutched her father's. And in her sleep, she murmured something that might have been "Daddy" or might have been a prayer. Nora Renshaw hadn't slept at all. She'd spent the night watching monitors she didn't fully understand, counting heartbeats displayed in green lines, memorizing the rhythm of machines that breathed for her son. A nurse came in to check Callum's vitals. "He's stable. All his numbers look good. Dr. Okafor will be by around 7 for morning rounds. He's a fighter, your son. Always has been." Nora looked at Callum's face, pale against the pillow, oxygen cannula in his nose, bandages visible above the hospital gown. Even as a boy, he never knew when to quit. After the nurse left, the ICU doors opened again. Senna Thornfeld stood in the doorway, holding a printed newspaper article in her shaking hands. Nora noticed her immediately. Their eyes met through the glass of the room's window. Nora's expression went through several stages: confusion, recognition, something that might have been anger. Then she stood, carefully extracted her hand from Willa's, and came to the door. She stepped into the hallway and closed the door quietly behind her. "Miss Thornfeld." Her voice was neutral, careful. "Mrs. Renshaw, I'm so sorry. I'm so—" Senna's practiced speeches died in her throat. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." Nora crossed her arms. "My son is lying in that bed because of a man your company broke. So unless you're here to tell me you're going to fix whatever's broken in that place, I don't have words for you." "You're right." Senna held out the article with shaking hands. "But I need you to read this. I need you to know this isn't the first time Callum saved my family." Nora took the paper. Read it. Her expression shifted. Surprise, then something more complicated. "This is your father." "Yes, the plant explosion, March 2013. Callum pulled him out. We never knew his name, never got to thank him. And then years later, he was working in my building. And the words stuck in Senna's throat. "I never noticed him. I walked past him every day for years, and I never noticed him." Nora was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its edge. "That sounds about right. Callum doesn't do things to be recognized. He does them because they need doing." "I know that now." Senna wiped at her eyes. "Mrs. Renshaw, I need you to understand something. Your son is a hero, not just for what he did yesterday, but for who he is. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career making sure people like him are never invisible again." Before Nora could respond, Callum's monitor started beeping differently. Not the steady rhythm from before. Something changing. Nora was on her feet instantly. "What's—" A nurse rushed in, checked the monitors, and smiled. "It's okay. It's good. He's waking up." Callum's eyes opened slowly. The confusion was immediate. That particular disorientation of waking up somewhere unexpected, in pain, with no memory of how you got there. His eyes swept the room. Monitors, IV, bandages, his mother, his daughter. And finally, standing in the doorway, Senna Thornfeld. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then memory, then understanding. "You're alive," he said, his voice rough from intubation. Of all the things he could have said, "Why am I here? What happened? Am I okay?" His first words were about someone else. Senna felt something crack in her chest. "So are you," she managed. "Thanks to Dr. Okafor, and thanks to you being too stubborn to die." "Daddy!" Willa launched herself at the bed. Nora caught her just in time. "Careful, honey. Your dad's hurt." "I don't care." Willa was crying and laughing simultaneously. "Daddy, you scared me so much." "I'm sorry." Callum reached for her hand with his good arm. "I'm okay. I'm right here." "You got shot." Willa's voice rose. "Why would you do that?" Callum looked at his daughter, this brave little girl who'd already lost too much in her short life, and gave her the only answer that mattered. "Because that's what we do, baby. We protect people." "But what about protecting yourself? What about protecting me?" The words burst out of Willa like they'd been building pressure for hours. "What if you died? What if you died and I didn't have anyone?" Nora spoke gently. "You'd have me, sweetheart. But I want my dad. Willa was fully crying now. I want my dad and my mom, and I want everyone to stop leaving me. The room went silent except for the machines and Willa's sobs. Callum pulled his daughter closer, despite the pain it must have caused. I'm not leaving you. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. But you promised that about Mom, too. And she... I know. Callum's voice broke. I know, baby. And I'm sorry. When Margot died, I promised her I'd give you stability. A normal life. That's all I want. Senna stood in the doorway, watching this family. Broken, scared, but holding on to each other with everything they had. This was what mattered. Not profits, not power, not the empire she'd built. This, love, connection, the people we fight to protect. She'd spent her whole career building walls, keeping people at a distance, treating emotions like weaknesses and humans like resources. And here was Callum Renshaw, a man who'd lost his wife, who worked for minimum wage, who'd nearly died. And he was richer than she'd ever been. Because he had this. He had them. And Senna had a $40 million penthouse and no one to share it with. She turned to leave, but Callum's voice stopped her. Miss Thornfeld, she turned back. The man who shot me, Jansen Murdoch, is he? Did anyone else get hurt? Of course. His first question after checking on his daughter was about other people. No one else was hurt. Jansen's in custody. What will happen to him? He's facing charges, but I'm working with the DA's office to get him help instead of just punishment. Mental health treatment, job placement assistance when he's ready. Callum studied her for a long moment. Good. He's not a bad person. Just a hurt one. Not everyone would be that generous. He shot you. Hurt people hurt people. I've seen it enough times to know that punishment doesn't heal wounds. Help does. Senna felt tears threatening again. You're remarkable. I'm a janitor who got shot. Not that remarkable. That's where you're wrong. Senna stepped closer. Callum, I need to tell you something. 6 years ago, there was an explosion at a chemical plant in New Jersey. You pulled 8 people out. One of them was my father. Callum's eyes widened slightly. Preston Thornfeld, that was my father. Senna's voice shook. I never got to thank you. We never knew your name. And then you were working in my building for years, and I walked past you every day and never noticed you. Callum looked at her, then at the article she'd brought. You don't need to thank me. I was just doing what needed to be done. You saved my father's life, and then yesterday you saved mine. Callum, you're a hero. I don't want publicity or recognition. I just want to do my job and take care of my daughter. That's it. Later, after Nora took Willa to get breakfast, Senna sat in the chair beside Callum's bed. I want to offer you something, she said carefully. A position. Director of Veteran Services and Employee Wellness. You'd build the entire program. Hire your own team. Report directly to me. Callum was quiet for a moment. What's the catch? No catch. Starting salary is $175,000. Full benefits. Flexible schedule so you can still be there for Willa. The number hit Callum like a second bullet. That was more than 10 times what he'd been making. I don't have a business degree. I don't have corporate experience. You have something better. Lived experience. You know what veterans need because you are one. You know what it's like to feel invisible because we made you invisible. Callum studied her face. One condition. Anything. Jansen Murdoch. Senna's face went pale. The man who shot you? I want him in the program. First participant. Full support. Mental health treatment. Job training. Everything. Callum, he nearly killed you. He was broken by a system that didn't recognize him as human. Callum's voice was steady. If this program is about helping broken people, we start with the person who broke the hardest. We prove that anyone can heal. Anyone can be redeemed. Senna stared at him for a long moment. You're asking me to hire the man who put a bullet in your chest. I'm asking you to save his life, the way you're trying to save your company's soul. The silence stretched between them. Then Senna nodded slowly. Okay, if that's what you need, we'll do it your way. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The board will think I've lost my mind. Maybe you have. Callum almost smiled. Maybe that's exactly what this company needs. 6 months into his new role, Callum found himself working late more often than he'd planned. Not because the job demanded it, because Senna was always there. They developed a routine without meaning to. Coffee at 7 in the morning, before anyone else arrived. Lunch at her desk, where she'd ask his opinion on policies and he'd give her honest answers she couldn't get from yes-men executives. And sometimes, on the hardest days, they'd stand at her office window and watch the sun set over Manhattan without saying anything at all. Willa noticed before either of them did. "Dad," she said one Saturday morning, while he was making pancakes, "do you like Miss Thornfeld?" Callum nearly dropped the spatula. "What? She's my boss, baby." "That's not what I asked." He looked at his daughter, this 7-year-old who noticed everything. "I think," he said carefully, "that she's a good person who's trying very hard to be better. And I respect that." Willa considered this. "Mom would have liked her." The words hit Callum like a wave. "You think so?" "Yeah, because she's brave. And Mom always said brave people deserve to be loved." Callum flipped a pancake, hiding the emotion that threatened to surface. "Your mom was right about a lot of things." "I know," Willa grinned. "She was right about you, too." 1 year later, the lobby of Thornfeld Financial Tower looked the same, but felt entirely different. People smiled more. They made eye contact. They stopped to hold doors for each other, to ask how someone's day was going, to treat janitors and security guards with the same courtesy they showed executives. The transformation hadn't been instant or easy, but it had been real. Callum stood in that lobby on a Wednesday morning, watching employees arrive for work, and marveled at how much had changed. He wore a tailored Navy suit now, his chest still twinged sometimes where the bullet had carved its path. A permanent reminder of the day everything shifted. But mostly he felt good, strong, present, purposeful. The past year had been the most challenging and rewarding of his life since leaving the military. He'd built the Veteran Services and Employee Wellness Program from nothing, hired a team of 15 specialists, placed over 200 veterans in meaningful employment, and fundamentally restructured how Thornfeld Financial treated its employees and Jansen Murdoch. Jansen had been the hardest and most important case, but now a year later, Jansen worked in the company's community outreach division, helping other struggling employees navigate resources and support systems. They met for coffee every Thursday morning, two broken men who'd found healing and second chances. The auditorium had been transformed for Family Appreciation Day, an event Callum had proposed 6 months earlier. Against the far wall, mounted on dark wood and surrounded by soft lighting, was a bronze plaque. In honor of those who serve without being seen, Callum spotted Willa the moment she entered, Nora right behind her. His daughter had grown in the past year, taller, more confident. "Dad!" she waved enthusiastically. When the auditorium was full, nearly 500 people, Senna took the stage. "A year ago, something terrible happened in this building," she began. "An act of violence that ended our illusions about who we were as a company. We learned that you can't build an empire on indifference, that treating people as disposable creates wounds that eventually bleed." She gestured to Callum, inviting him to join her. He hadn't prepared remarks, but standing there, looking out at all those faces, he found words coming anyway. "I'm not comfortable being called a hero," he said. "I did what my training taught me. I noticed someone in danger, and I moved. That's it. But here's what I've learned this year. Heroism isn't just about dramatic moments. It's about showing up every day and choosing to recognize people. The janitor mopping your floor, the security guard at the entrance, the single parent juggling 3 jobs, the veteran struggling to find purpose." He looked at Jansen, who was sitting in the third row, tears streaming down his face. "We're all capable of both breaking and healing. And the choice we make, to treat people as disposable or as infinitely valuable, that choice creates the world we live in." Willa was watching him with those serious eyes, and Callum spoke directly to her. "My daughter asked me once what a hero is. The real answer is simple. A hero is someone who refuses to look away from suffering. Someone who notices a problem and says, 'I can help with that.' Someone who believes that people matter more than anything else." Then Jansen Murdoch walked to the stage. The auditorium went completely silent. "A year ago," Jansen said, his voice shaking but holding, "I was the worst version of myself. I brought a gun into this building. I hurt a good man who was trying to help me. Tears streamed down his face. But here's what I learned. Shame can either destroy you or transform you. And the difference is whether anyone offers you grace. Mr. Renshaw offered me grace. Miss Thornfeld offered me grace. They didn't erase what I did, but they didn't let it define me forever. He pulled out a photograph. This is my daughter, Emma. She's 12 now. Last month she came to visit me at work, and she said, "Dad, I'm proud of you." That's what second chances create. Callum stepped forward and embraced Jansen, the man who had shot him. The auditorium erupted in applause. Later, Willa found her father near the bronze plaque. "Dad, I made something for you." She handed him a rolled-up piece of paper. It was a drawing, crayon and marker. 3 versions of Callum, in his Navy uniform, in his janitor uniform, and in his current business suit. All 3 standing side by side, holding hands. Above them, in Willa's careful handwriting, "My dad, always a hero. No matter what he wears." Callum's vision blurred with tears. "Baby, this is perfect. Dad, can I tell you something?" "Always." "I used to be scared that you'd do something heroic again and die, but I'm not scared anymore." "No? No, because I figured out what you were trying to teach me." She took his hand. "Being a hero isn't about dying for something. It's about living for something. Waking up every day and choosing to help people even when it's hard. That's harder than dying. That takes more courage." Callum stared at his daughter, this wise, wonderful person he'd somehow been trusted to raise. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just notice it more now because you're not hiding anymore." Senna found them by the window, looking out at Manhattan. Willa grabbed her hand. "Miss Thornfeld, can we go get pizza? Grandma said we could if you said yes." Senna laughed. "Pizza sounds perfect, but only if you let me buy." "Deal!" Willa bounced on her heels. Then she stopped, suddenly serious. "Miss Thornfeld, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "My friend Sophie has a stepmom. She says stepmoms are like bonus moms." Willa bit her lip. "Do you think, if someone doesn't have a mom anymore, could they get a bonus mom someday?" The question hung in the air. Callum felt his heart stop. Senna looked at Willa, then at Callum, then back at Willa. Her eyes were bright with tears. "I think," she said softly, "that families aren't always the ones we're born into. Sometimes they're the ones we choose, and sometimes they choose us." Willa smiled, that radiant, gap-toothed smile. "Good, because I choose you." She grabbed Senna's hand with her left and Callum's hand with her right. "Now come on. Grandma's waiting and I'm starving." They walked together through the lobby. The janitor who became a hero, the CEO who learned to care, and the little girl who'd just quietly begun building herself a new family. Nora was waiting by the elevator. She caught Callum's eye and smiled. A knowing smile, a mother's smile. "Took you long enough," she said. "We were having a moment," Willa announced. "I chose Miss Thornfeld to be in our family." Nora raised an eyebrow at Senna. "Is that so?" Senna laughed. A real laugh, warm and full of hope. "Apparently I didn't get a vote." "You don't need one," Willa said firmly. "I already decided." The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. 3 generations of Renshaws and 1 Ice Queen who'd finally thawed. As the doors closed, Callum looked at his reflection in the polished metal. A year ago, he'd been invisible. A janitor pushing a squeaky cart through marble hallways, existing in the margins of other people's lives. Now he was standing here, surrounded by the people he loved, building something that mattered. Willa leaned against his side. Senna's shoulder brushed his. Nora hummed softly under her breath. And Callum Renshaw, the invisible hero of floor 42, finally understood what his wife had meant in those last days. "Promise me you'll let yourself be happy again," Margot had whispered. "Promise me you won't disappear." He'd kept the first promise. He was learning to keep the second. The elevator descended, carrying them toward pizza and laughter, and all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life worth living. Behind them, on the 42nd floor, the bronze plaque caught the last light of day, in honor of those who serve without being seen. But Callum Renshaw wasn't invisible anymore. He was home. The end.